Hey, how's it going? Welcome to another BioDevils podcast. I'm here with my best friend, Mr. Martin. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello. I don't know. I don't have much to say, but hello. It's great to be back.
Yeah, second podcast of the year, technically, because we have a Onimusha one, I think, that we recorded not too long ago, actually, off the top of my head. But yeah, I don't keep track of what podcasts we do and how many we do. I just know that we do them. Uh, but that's beside the point. Uh, GOG's Dreamlist. I'm sure you've heard about it.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and kind of a big deal, right? Because well, maybe not, but I don't know. I think it's kind of a big deal at least. It's a new community feature, right, for GOG that lets you vote for games to be ported over to GOG or re-released on GOG. And these could be games that were PC games, but you could also suggest games that were never PC games. So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a fan- uh, I think it's a fantastic idea, right? Because since people are voting for it, it will show a market interest in what they want to release or not, right? And then, well, they can take these numbers to uh, the owners of the current IP and then show like, hey, there's actually interest for this product to be released on our platform. Do you want us to do it or not?
Yeah,
So I think it's a very smart idea.
yeah. So one of the things that I was thinking about too is, the obvious choice is to like start voting on like all the like popular stuff that you could think of that would probably still sell fairly well today if it got ported again or if it got remastered in some way, right? But one of the things that I think is really important to note, right, is that you could also vote for games that are not necessarily on PC, or let me rephrase, were never released on PC, right? So this could be like a PlayStation 1 game or like a SNES game, for example, right? If it exists, you can vote for it to get a port. And I think that right there is kind of a big deal because, okay, uh, I don't know if GOG is going to say not really take those into consideration, right? And only focus on the games that did get genuine PC ports, right? To have them be compatible with modern OSs and modern hardware, right? But I do think that the reason why this is like a big deal is that there's a lot of obscure games out there, right? Like, and obviously, like what comes to mind is like stuff on like the PS2 or like the PS1 in particular, right? That probably deserves a second lease on life and might not ever get that chance otherwise.
Yeah, uh, th- there are there are a lot of games that people fondly remember that just kind of faded away over time, right? And there's a new interest for those games being ported somewhere at least, right? So
Yeah.
that people can actually yeah, and enjoy them in some capacity. So yeah,
Well,
I don't
and
like. I think it's a good idea.
and I was gonna say too, it's not just the stuff that people remember fondly, but also stuff that people have never heard of before, right? I think
Yeah,
that's the kind of the key distinction there because there's stuff that people are fond of, and then there's stuff that people only heard about like through content creators, right? Because they might do like a video essay or like some kind of retrospective on like a certain game or franchise, right? And
yeah,
you know, those games are probably going to be lost to time forever on whatever platform they released on initially, right? Because one of the things that I was like thinking of too is like there's this there's this very obscure retro Resident Evil clone that was released for free on like out of some like magazine in Japan called Abispo, right? Now I registered that as one of the games that you could vote for on GOG because, and before I kind of continue with Abispo, you could do that on GOG's Dreamlist. You could register games that might be in their database, and if it's not in their database, you can provide a source for them to further investigate that, and then for them to officially add that game into their database, so that way it can be voted on in the future. So just something to throw that out there. But
yeah, if it exists, they will look into it, right? As long as the community submits said game, and I think that's an absolutely fantastic idea.
Yeah, so they have a lot of games that are in their database, right? Some of the games that are in their database might not be registered under the like English title. It might be registered in the like Japanese title, for example. Some of the Samurai Warriors games, for example, that's the case. Like you could find like I think Samurai Warriors 1 in Extreme Legends, but then it has trouble finding Samurai Warriors 2, the Empires expansion, and the Extreme Legends expansion for that game. But not the HD version, which was only released in Japan under the, while you search up the Japanese title for that, right? So that's kind of what I was getting at. But yeah, anyway, I registered Abispo, and that's like one of those obscure like horror games, Resident Evil like games that was like Resident Evil clones, I should say, right? That was like never released outside of Japan, for sale or for free. Not many people know about it. There's, I think, like maybe like 2 videos on YouTube on this game, like out there. So like when I think about like a system like this, right? I think like, well, this is awesome for not just bringing back the popular stuff, but also the stuff that like we'll never probably get an HD remaster for, but maybe we can get a port of some kind with an official translation on top of that, right?
Yeah.
But I kind of want to get your take on that too. Like, is there like any like obscure like titles that you think maybe people should start like consider voting for, and like maybe even like registering on this dream list?
So nothing comes to mind, right? Because it's like I keep forgetting in my head what is obscure or not, because I'm hyper focused on just what I enjoy in general.
Yeah.
Right. But nothing really comes to mind per se.
What about like something that's niche that people know of and have heard of, but not many people play it?
Well, this isn't games that were never released on PC, but it's like some of the most voted games on here are games like Black and White, or
Yeah.
these like early 2000s PC games that have like licensing issues. You have like Need for Speed Underground, Underground 2, right? And it's like, yeah, those games were sold at one point, but because of EA not wanting to put them on the storefront on their own platform, or there's some licensing issues there, so they don't want to renew that and port it on EA Access or whatever, right? They're just kind of like lost, like you can't buy them anymore, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of those fans, they want to play those games again, so it's like, yeah, so it is great to see stuff like that getting a bunch of votes, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, I was more like thinking about like the obscure stuff, outside of just the popular stuff or the stuff that I want, right? Like, because Onimusha, for example, that I'm going to vote for that, right? Like, any port of Onimusha that I can get, I'm going to vote for it. It did, like, we had, about the Ubisoft ports, right?
Yeah.
For, like, Capcom games,
I own
right?
3.
Okay.
I own Onimusha 3 on PC, actually.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you happen to own like DMC3 and Chaos Legion by chance as well, or?
Uh, I don't own Chaos Legion. DMC3, I think I have it somewhere, like the special edition,
Uh-huh.
or whatever, on PC. The one that's like kind of wonky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, funny enough, that I think that port was also being voted on by people, and I'm not exactly sure why when there's an HD collection, but hey, whatever floats people's boats. Um, Anyway, stuff like Onimusha, right? Like, I'm gonna vote for that. Like Onimusha 3, like we said, it had a port. It's, I think, the highest one out of any of the Onimusha games that's being voted on right now, with Onimusha 2 following right after by like, I think, shy of like 15 votes or something like that, maybe a little more or less. Which is, it's cool to see, right? But it's still pretty low compared to like some of the more popular stuff, and I'm not surprised. Partially because, well, a, this feature is still fairly new; it only came out a couple of days ago, and b, some of these franchises, they're not as popular as they used to be, or they kind of fell off into obscurity, or they started to become more niche uh, than what they initially started off as. And I'm like super stoked to see where this goes. Like, I do want to see like the Capcom ports specifically, because if we got Resident Evil, we got Dino Crisis, right? We might as well start seeing things like Chaos Legion and Onimusha get ported over. Um,
Yeah.
but then aside from that, like I could think of like other stuff too that might not necessarily be niche, but definitely could use a comeback, like stuff like the Tenchu series, or like some of the Metal Gear Solid games that we don't have yet, or
Yeah, yeah, like Snake Eater is like one of the most voted games on there, and I'm like, I believe Konami ported that not too long ago uh, on PC, but it's just kind of interesting seeing that, like, despite that, yeah, they want this on GOG, right?
yeah,
It's
it's well, what I find interesting is it's not just any version of Snake Eater. It's like it's I've seen votes for the HD remaster of Snake Eater, and votes for the Legacy Collection, and votes for
mm,
just the like vanilla version of Snake Eater. So it's like, yeah, it's stuff like that where you might see like duplicates, like Onimusha, for example. Going back to that, like Warlords technically has like four different submissions, because you have the original release, which technically did have a PC port, like an obscure one in like China and Russia or whatever. You have the PS2 port, the HD port, plus Genma, all being like submitted and like suggested, right? Which is like insane, but like, it kind of makes sense, because there's also kind of that stipulation of like, okay, yeah, they could bring back that game, but which version or variation of that port are they gonna do? Because like Resident Evil, for example, right? Like the first one is not based on director's cut, so it's actually missing content by technicality.
yeah,
So it's stuff like that, right? Um, and I do also see people like voting for like stuff like Lost Planet, and like I was actually surprised people voted on like the Way of the Samurai games, which I do think like the first two definitely need it the most, because you can't play those on PC just yet. Um, yeah, Dynasty Warriors, and like all sorts of stuff that's getting like voted on. Um,
yeah. There's a lot of duplicates too, for sure.
yeah,
But in general, it's just great to see interest overall.
yeah.
Uh,
I
yeah.
you know what I found interesting too with this community feature, which I'm not sure if they're gonna kind of sort this out over time, but I did notice that like for Resident Evil in particular, like you can find like mods being suggested for the community
Yeah.
feature. So, what is your take on that in particular?
I mean, there are mods that are accessible through GOG already. I believe Fallout London, one of the ways to install that is through GOG, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just like it's definitely been done on their platform before.
Hmm.
So it's not like it's not an outrageous concept to me. It's just it is very interesting seeing people suggest mods.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah. So like the other thing too, I think is interesting is that you don't necessarily have to suggest PC games, right? As mentioned before. So you can start like recommending like Nintendo DS games, for example, or like Wii U exclusives and Switch exclusives, right? Um, do you think that that would be our way to see like stuff like I don't know, like the Bayonetta games, for example, to like finally leave like Nintendo exclusivity for 2 and 3 in that case, right? Or like anything else in
I
particular that's like exclusive to a platform.
I doubt it because look, as good of a feature as this is that we can vote on this stuff, at the end of the day, all it does is show interest,
Yeah.
right? At the end of the day, like these corporations, GOG have to reach out to them and they have to give the green light for them to do their thing, right?
Mm.
And while I don't think Nintendo's gonna play ball with that, right? Uh, it's great at showing interest at least, right? Uh, so we'll see, but I don't know if it's gonna sway corps that are very conservative with putting their stuff on PC.
True. Yeah. I think.
Yeah,
I think I could see
Nintendo
that
probably
point too.
being
Yeah, like
yeah
with Nintendo because of how like how closed minded Nintendo tends to be. I think is the
yeah
right word, right?
yeah they're very conservative with we don't want anything on something that's not our platform, right? I mean
Yeah.
yeah
Okay, so you know, if there is like a, if there's a probably like the more likely thing would be like stuff that was actually on PC, right? Probably not like variations that were on consoles, but I do think it's interesting to see like people go to those suggestions as well. Um, and I do think that it is interesting that it is something that GOG specifically wanted to do, where like, hey, they wanted to bring that attention to these games and show that interest, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a guarantee, right? Um,
yeah because I mean what is the harm in at least allowing people to vote for whatever, right?
yeah,
It
yeah.
shows interest in general.
I I like you know what I like about it too though. This feature is that it is in a like database, right? And when it comes to a game that like that you or I or anybody else that may want to see like get whether it be localized, right, or get ported, right, um, or even just re-released on PC through GOG. I do like the fact that they're essentially giving the tools necessary to the community to have their voice, leave some comments about like, okay, like why was this game like meaningful to you, right? Why would you want to see it released on GOG, right? Because they understand that like, hey, the stuff that you're going to be asking for, right? It's probably stuff that you have played before, whether it be on PC or on other
Yeah,
platforms, right? Which I think is also kind of a neat thing too. Um, but also just like, hey, if the game exists, provide us the sources with what this game is, right? And we'll look into it and we'll add in information into this ever-growing database, right? Because, you know, like I said before, like there's stuff you can look up and it might show up on the database, but it might not show up using the English title, right? And in order for you to get the vote in, right, you might have to suggest the English titled variation of that game, or the localized port of it, right? Or you have to
Yeah,
suggest
like
like
if
the
it's
Japanese or, you know, whatever region. Yeah.
yeah. If it's like a Japanese only game, for example, you're gonna have to input that one, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I
It,
don't know. Like it's
mhm.
uh I think there's very little harm in doing this, right? Uh I think it's a neat idea. It's just I am worried that people are gonna blow it out of proportion a little bit because I mean, like I said, if despite uh, there being a lot of interest for a game, these corps again just have like final say,
Yeah.
right? So it's like I don't think it's gonna do as much as people think it will, but I mean, there is no harm in at least showing your interest.
Yeah. I think, well, you know what? Actually, I kind of want to add to that. Um,
Yeah.
it's almost like the way you could look at it is like GOG is kind of like the middleman, right?
Yeah.
Because like okay, for years people have done like okay, let's go to like a change.org or like whatever, have a digital petition to ask for stuff. I'm guilty of it, right? I'm not saying that I haven't done that because I have done it, right? But what I think is great about this, right, is like okay, you have GOG, which is a known corporation, right? Who works with these
Mm.
companies, right, directly, uh, and they could now go there with like these numbers or these comments, right, about like what people want, like directly to these companies and say, hey, like we would like to be able to sell this in this game, right? You know, and there's no harm in having that happen, right? Because they could say, hey, we could provide the service to sell those keys on our platform. We make a X amount of profit. I'm not going to get into like the profit side of things,
Yeah.
right? But they make a certain amount of profit. The companies that own these games make more profit out of these games. And even if it is just a GOG exclusive, right? Like they're still making money off of these games, right? Because that's at the end of the day, these companies probably think about like, well, are we going to make any sort of money off of releasing old games, right? Which is part of the
Yeah.
reason why like a lot of these games end up getting delisted to begin with, right? Is that people stop buying them.
Yeah.
So, so I do think that like GOG being kind of like the middleman here, kind of is like those petitions, like almost like being validated in a way where like they, you know, they provide the like the direct voice, right? They show like, okay, these are the numbers that we're kind of expecting for sales, right? Or this is how many people voted for this. If we can get this to kind of happen, maybe we can get this like ball rolling, and maybe we can see these games like come back, right? Because I think
Yeah.
that's the more um, and I don't know, maybe this is how you see it too. It's like that's the more like realistic approach, right, to how this system would work. Because
Yeah, for sure.
like I said, I don't necessarily disagree in that. Like I don't think like certain games that were never released on PC would like have that opportunity. I do think that it's nice that you can suggest them, right? And I do think that it at least opens up the possibility for that to happen, right? But I think the more likely thing that I think GOG would do is like look at the stuff that did actually have PC ports because it's easier, right?
Yeah.
And also too, you notice how like certain games, right? They're marked with like, okay, like you know, Code Veronica's on here, right? Or like Final Fantasy, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
marked
yeah,
with
yeah. Like Code Veronica, for example, GOG themselves are like, yeah, we have picked this one out, like, go vote for it, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that game was never on PC. So it's
exactly.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I was just about to say that too. It's like you notice how like some of these have our pick on there, meaning that they're the ones that wanted this too, right? So like, um, so I think that holds a little more merit too. If that like they're also kind of like voicing that, yeah, like we at GOG would also like to see some of these games get released on our platform so that like because maybe some of the people that work at GOG also happen to play games, right? And maybe they want to be able to play some of the same stuff that we want to play, right?
Yeah.
So uh I don't know what much else I could say about this. But I do like this, right? And I do agree with you in that, like, yeah, I could see this being blown out of proportion, like people having unrealistic expectations, right? Um, I think the more realistic thing is to expect like stuff that was on PC for sure, right? That is uh, a higher like has a higher likelihood of being released on the platform, right? Um,
Yeah.
but I do also think that it is nice to see that like we can just vote for really anything, right? Even new stuff too, stuff that's like not exclusive to GOG at the moment, right? Or just not on GOG at all. So, um, yeah. So I would like to hear some of your like final thoughts on this before we wrap things up here.
I don't know, like, I think I just regurgitate what I said before. It's a good idea.
Mm.
It is great that GOG is the middleman, like you said.
Yeah.
Uh, that way we don't have to use this like change.org petitions and whatnot, right? It's just I am worried that people are gonna blow this out of proportion a little bit and think that, oh, this will like save us all, right? We're gonna get everything on PC.
Oh
And it's
no.
like, nah, that's not how it works. It's just there to show interest at the very least, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, it is a good thing overall. I mean, there's nothing wrong with uh, showing an active interest and seeing if somebody at least will give the green light. Because I'm sure some of these games will be approved. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well,
So
and also to to add to that, like some of these games might already have like non-announced like ports or HD remasters that are being worked on, right? So like they might be getting voted on and not a lot of votes are coming in for those games and yet they'll still possibly end up on GOG. So it's you never know,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, like the threshold of interest, I guess, right, is dependent on what game it is, right? If there's something on PC, or something that's been on PC before, for example, right?
Yeah.
You might not need that many votes for them to show numbers like, hey, some people want to play this again, and it'll be approved, right? Because the port is there somewhere in like a storage shed, you know. There's code there. It's not hard to do. It's just, yeah, do we have enough people wanting to play this or not? You know. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I think yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because because and it's not just not just stuff that's old or not localized, right? It's like stuff that's indie games, right? Indie games are also just not on GOG as well, and they could use that, right?
yep,
Um, because I was like suggesting stuff like uh, "You Will Die Here Tonight" or not "You Will Die Here Tonight," but "Evil Tonight." Sorry, uh,
yeah,
similar title, and then like "No Sun Tomorrow" or "No Sun Tomorrow," "No Sun to Worship." Blah. Uh, so stuff like that, like indie horror games as well, that or like the Departing, which I'm pretty certain will have a GOG port because Alyssa Developers Cut is on GOG. So
yeah.
it's stuff like that too is also got that potential and possibility. I'm really excited to see where this goes. I do think like I don't want to like discourage anybody, right, from like voting on anything, right? Because like I think people should vote, and especially for the stuff that is obscure, just to show that interest, right? Because at least that increases
Yeah.
the potential and possibility, right? But also let's not exceed or over expect things out of GOG, right? Because they're only
Yeah,
at the end of the day, right?
yeah, like at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with showing your interest. Like, go ahead, vote for whatever the fuck you want, right?
Yeah.
It's if you want it on that platform, go and vote for it. There's no harm in doing that, right? Just just keep in mind that there's gonna be some stuff here that'll probably not be approved, you know. And while you showing interest will definitely it might sway some corpo's head, right? It it's don't expect it to be like, oh, my game has high numbers, it's definitely gonna be on PC now, because that's not how it works, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, keep your expectations a little bit lower than that.
Well,
So
yeah. I mean, and let's not also forget too that there's certain games that have licensing issues too. So
yeah,
um,
I
yeah.
think one of the main reasons Need for Speed hasn't been relisted on stores again, even though those games were on PC, like Underground 1 and 2, right? It's because they have a lot of car manufacturer deals and brand deals. I mean, like Underground 2 had a advertisement for Burger King, for example, right?
Oh yeah, and
And
Best Buy and
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So,
And I think it's like, I think that's why, because like EA just doesn't want to fork out money for like these advertisements again, so they don't want to waste resources like replacing assets and whatnot, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah, so like I just wanted to talk about this because I do think it's really cool that this is a community feature. I did want to bring it to
oh yeah,
people's attention because like okay, like even in the likelihood that some of these games don't get ported, right? And like I said, some of these I kind of understand why they wouldn't be just out of licensing, and in some cases it just might be like the companies just don't want to do that, right? I do think that this is a great community feature that should be talked about, and I do think that stuff that's not localized and stuff that's like kind of niche, this is kind of your chance to shed some light on those games to show that yeah, there is like some niche interest in that should justify at least a small like PC release maybe. Doesn't guarantee it, but at least it's much better than just trying to do a change.org petition that just kind of goes out into the ether. That's unheard of, right? Like
yeah,
having GOG kind of be there as your middleman, I think is a great step forward. I think because right now, like aside from the stuff that's niche, like we're seeing stuff like Metal Gear Solid, Silent Hill, all sorts of stuff that's being like suggested, and some of that stuff is getting up there in numbers, especially like the Silent Hill games. So it's definitely something worth talking about, in my opinion.
yeah. Go vote.
Yeah. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed this short little podcast. Don't know when the next one is or what it'll be about, but with that all said, we hope you all enjoyed. Martin, where can we find you, good sir?
You can find me on Twitter at PyschoRender. That's pretty much it.
Yep. And then you all can find me as BioDevil_Dom, pretty much on everything and anything. I have a link tree somewhere in the description. You'll find it, I'm sure. So anyway, take care and hope to see you all soon. Bye.
Take care.